So I wanted to do a video about Mark. I'm not sure where I'm gonna start or where I'm gonna go. I first met Mark through my girlfriend at the time in high school. It was her younger brother. He was a kind of quiet, kind of timid guy. When I didn't know him, we weren't really friends at that point. A couple years later, I get an invitation to join this band by Mark, through my girlfriend at the time, called Ashes of the Red Heifer. They were looking for a drummer, didn't have a drummer, and Mark just happened to know that I drummed, so he kind of invited me to join them. That was really when my relationship with Mark started, my friendship with Mark started. It was a good time, but the members, it was a mess. It was really more of a boys club than anything, more than it was a band. I did have my fun. We did have a few songs, but that was really it. It was never anything super serious. So that band kind of started and ended. I don't really remember a good time frame, but it was just one of those things. It was just a bunch of guys hanging out and being, fucking idiots together. And so that kind of eventually just broke up. Never really continued. I had kind of done my own thing musically. With just a few friends here and there. I met up with a friend named Angel. He was more of a punk rocker. I wasn't too much into punk. When he would have his guitar and I would have my guitar, it would be something kind of different. It was something a little more experimental. It wasn't punk. It wasn't metal. It for sure wasn't metal. It was really soft. It was really soft rock. Almost folkish. At that point, we didn't really know what to do with it. It was kind of just like a little side thing for the both of us. We just kind of messed with it, and then eventually I was like, what if we had a bass player? I know a bass player from Ashes of the Red Heifer, that this band I used to be in, they broke up, we all just kind of stopped jamming, but he's a bass player, we can maybe get something going, right? So that's how I kind of took Mark with me musically anywhere that I went. And that started tickets to the pistol pageant. I think that's what the band was called. It was really weird. It was highly experimental for all of us. We were all kind of out of our element, and that kind of helped us explore ourselves within each other a little bit more openly. From that band, at the same time, I didn't know this, at the same time, Mark was meeting with a guitarist friend of his, and he apparently was doing some kind of experimental music. It wasn't necessarily metal. It was more so silly. Whereas Tickets to the Pistol Pageant was not, I don't want to say serious, but there was emotional depth to it, and not that there wasn't room for silliness. I mean, at one time we considered naming the band Seinfeld because it was a band about nothing with music about nothing. But, obviously we didn't go with that. We were both doing this experimental band separately. And I think at some point, Mark introduced me to that other guitarist, and slowly we got that going as a bit of a band. So that band for a little bit was kind of just the three of us. It was me on drums, Mark on bass, and a friend of ours on guitar. It was very quickly becoming a metal outfit, which I think was comfortable for all the three of us. I mean, I think all three of us were metalheads. Mark, I'd kind of seen how he does when it comes to experimentation of music. I could see that I saw one side of him, but now it was like, okay, let me see, the side that you project, with your love of metal music and things like that. It very quickly became kind of like, I don't want to say like thrash, but it was like this. It was just this metal. That was the best way to describe the music. It was just metal. I don't think it was any specific genre of metal. It for sure wasn't like garage and I don't even want to say thrash, even though some of what we were playing was inspired by thrash bands. Not so much in speed or in power, but more so in attitude, I guess. So we're messing with this three-piece band, and we're like, okay, if it's gonna become a metal outfit, we gotta build around it, kind of. Mark, in the band that he first introduced me to, which was Ashes of the Red Heifer, eventually changed his name to Final Death Throes. I named it that, and I said that's way better than Ashes of the Red Heifer. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But during that transition of Ashes of the Red Heifer to Final Death Throes, which was the second formation of that first band, I was introduced to another friend that would do lead vocals, screaming, pig squealing, that kind of thing. I was introduced to that person through Mark, and then I said, hey, well, I remember that guy. He thrashes his voice, like he fit the bill. He really, he kind of carried the sound that we were already kind of messing with. And I said, we should bring him on. That would kind of solve our vocalist issue. It was the four of us for a good while. It was me, Mark on bass. We had that lead guitarist, and now we had our vocalist. It was just the four of us for a good while. But I think the trajectory of our music kind of called for both the rhythm section and a lead section. And at least that's where it was going. And we tried for a really, really long time to find a second guitarist. And we really couldn't find them. I mean, we were literally just kind of trying anybody at that point, including guitarists that were already in other bands that could also offer us a bit of commitment. I mean, we were literally trying anything, and it's weird looking back, because it's not like we were like working on an album or anything, right? But we were at least understanding that, hey, this is the trajectory that the music is taking. We're gonna need a rhythm section. Eventually, our lead guitarist realized that he actually knew somebody that also played guitar. Wasn't sure of his skill level, anything like that. We weren't really worried about it, we were just kind of really worried about getting that rhythm guitarist. That's how we were introduced to him. And then finally, you have the 5-piece band. With all those bands kind of coming together, falling apart, coming together, falling apart, coming together, falling apart, you finally had the foundation of what is very near and dear to my heart and affectionately known as The Danger of Vengeance, which was our band. It was 5 guys. We all acted very differently, but we were all kind of weird in our own way. But it was really just this bunch of lovable weirdos, right? You had the lead guitarist, who was like a regular troublemaker. You had the rhythm guitarist, who was like the quiet, funny guy, You had the lead singer, who just kind of gets everybody riled up, knows how to get people riled up and make them laugh. You had me, who was the oldest member. It was kind of weird being the adult, because I think I was like 20. I was like 19, 20 at the time. But you had me as the oldest, and I'm trying to kind of let's make something here, boys, because we were all having fun. We were all putting in equal efforts. But you still have to steer a group of dudes, right? Like if you want anything to get done. And then last but not least, you had Mark. You had Mark on bass. Peeling the curtain back a little bit, our vocalist didn't write all the songs. It was a collaborative effort. I provided, of course, the naming of the band and a bunch of song titles as well as lyrics. Mixing around lyrics, not necessarily lyrics of my own, but mixing them to where where we were happy with it. You had Mark, who also wrote lyrics, probably the weirdest ones that we had, but it really kind of showed you where Mark was creatively. That place, at least in subject matter, was pretty dark, but presented in a really funny way. It could be dark subject matter. I'm not talking like really evil things, but I'm talking things like monsters and the boogeyman, or like a vampire or Jack the Ripper type of person. And those can be scary subjects, but he presented them in a very, very funny and comical way. And you had him present these songs, and it was like no question. It was no question, because not only was Mark really creatively there, he was a talented guy. He really was, as far as like all our positions in the band, he really was the lovely, friendly giant. He's a really big panda bear. He's just this warming, character. He's hilarious. You could hear his laugh from far away. He had a very unique laugh. And there was still this like just guy's guy, this metal guy, you know, this it's really hard to nail down who this guy was. I mean, he just really was special like that. You had these 5 guys in this band. You had Mark's insanely creative storytelling lyrics. You had mine more on the serious, you know, like let's face the horrors of real life. And then you had the lead singer. I don't really know what that guy was writing about, but I mean, you kind of had all of that creativity come together, and that was it. That was the Danger of Vengeance. From that group, you know, I think we did a lot of growing up during those times. Of course, at the very beginning, it was really fun. It was really carefree. We were just kind of doing what we wanted. We were playing whatever the hell we wanted. You know, there was no one really directing the band in that sense, as in, you know, like, y'all should do this, y'all should play like this, y'all should play like that. It wasn't anything like that. We definitely didn't have that kind of influence. The influence was just us coming together, doing what we thought was cool, doing what we thought was like thrash, you know, like we were just having fun with it. We all had very different styles. We were all very different people. We were all very young people, you know, kind of, you know, in that sweet spot of starting to figure out what the world really was. I guess kind of the direction that it was taking us, you know, it was these last final years and months and days and minutes of your boyhood. You know, you're no longer a kid, you're not really an adult, you're kind of stuck in between somewhere. You know, you were having fun, you know, just hanging out with the dudes and, you know, drinking or smoking or whatever. But you also had a job, you know, you're responsible for, you know, keeping your tank full so you can keep going to work. And, you know, whether you're giving money to your mom or not, you know, you're buying your own things. You're really trapped between what it was to be a boy and to what it was to be a man. And that's why those years were so formative I think for all of us, for sure for me. I did a lot of learning in those years. I did a lot of loving things to people that aren't family. You know, they became friends, and through that friendship, they felt like family. I learned a lot about what it is to like love people, you know, not just love your mom, your siblings, or your family members, but like just just to love people. And that whole group really was the first group of men and women outside of family that I loved, you know. It's kind of weird to reflect on it now because, you know, at the time it was so tumultuous. We didn't know that that's what we were going through. You know, we didn't understand what was going, you know, we all thought we were so grown up, and the truth is we were still kids. But it's like, we're kids, but we're scratching on like adult duties and responsibilities, you know, and that's a very hard time to navigate. That's a very, you know, that's the first time you're ever there. You know, how are you gonna know what to do the first time that you face, you know, that kind of middle ground, that adversity? You start to figure out who you are, you know. And Mark was in that group, helping me get through things. You know, he was, you know, we hung out all the time. The girl that I was dating at the time was a sister. It was, you know, it was really, really good nostalgic times. You know, when I think back on them now, you know, it's weird because you don't think it's nostalgia when you're there, but now that you're older and you go back, it's like, whoa, you know, those were good old days, you know. And Mark was present, you know, through all of that. You know, I explored what the themes of what friendship was, and he was there. I explored the themes of what music was, and he was there. I explored the themes of, you know, songwriting and you know, manhood and things like that. Mark was ever present there, and, you know, and he was there for me. He was there for me a lot, not just presently there as in the background, but like actually there for me. I'll always thank him for being in that group. It was a loving bunch of people. You know, we had our issues, and, you know, we went our ways and we did our thing. And it kind of sucks because there's part of you that thinks that those times are gonna last forever. And then, you know, you're looking at them a decade down the line, and it's like, oh, you know, that wasn't life. You know, that was just me growing up. But yeah, Mark was really there for a lot of it. And I do feel sad now that he's gone. You know, I do feel like I could have reached out more often. There's a rift in the friendship group, and it mostly has to do with me leaving home, I think. Yeah, I left my childhood home. I mean, I'd already like moved out of like my mom's house and stuff, but like I left my childhood home. I moved to a different city. You know, you see people less and less. You know, you still try to keep in touch with the group, right? You send each other memes and things like that, but you do lose touch. You know, you still lose touch. It's just part of growing up. One of the last times I hung out with Mark, I was at this party, and I had a bunch of my friends there with me. One of the friends that I had was part of this band, you know, back in the day. He shows up at the party, you know, very welcoming, you know, just that big bear, friendly bear that Mark always was. He, you know, just immediately was like, hey, Joey, you know, like, what's going on? You know, we were hanging out, and it was like, whoa, you know, I haven't seen this guy in a really long time. We're hanging out, we're talking, you know, all kinds of stuff. And then, out of nowhere, like there's a scuffle in the back of the house, and everyone's kind of like crowding around, kind of like, oh shit, what's going on? I, of course, go to the back, you know, trying to be a peacemaker as much as I can. I go to the back to see what the argument was about. And it turns out that the argument was about somebody that wasn't welcome at the house. They either had, you know, past issues, something. But it was somebody that wasn't welcome at the house. They were spouting off some racist shit, you know? And at this party, you had Hispanics, you had white guys, you had black guys. It was like a whole mix of people. And this guy was just mouthing off on some racist shit. He was saying some really, really ugly, derogatory things that I heard with my own ears. You know, it was very disgusting. And the guy that's throwing the party, that's obviously like, hey, you're not welcome here, he gets set off. Right? Rightfully so. It's his house. This guy's being an asshole and he's being racist. Not cool, right? His rights have gone off, right? Well, this old guy has like a blown up knee, right? Like he's literally got like pins and needles in his leg, and he's shouting off this racist shit. And so this friend whose house it was, you know, he starts like losing his shit, right? And he spits in the guy's face. I've got him by one arm, another friend has him by another arm, and we're kind of pulling him away because we're genuinely like, oh, this dude's gonna kill this guy. You know, like this guy is genuinely gonna kill this guy. Or, you know, best case scenario, he just like socks him in the face and goes to jail or something, right? Well, all of this is happening. We're pulling this friend away, and, you know, we're trying to talk to him, and literally nobody's getting through to him. I mean, he's drunk, he's sweating, he's staring right through us to try and get to that guy. And in comes Mark, just out of nowhere. In comes Mark, and he's just like, "What's going on? You know, like what's going? You know, like what's happening?" And you know, I'm like kind of trying to tell him like, "Oh, this guy's being a shithead back there. You know, he's saying some racist shit. He's saying this racist shit, and you know, clearly we're trying to keep them separated, so that this guy doesn't literally kill this old man." Mark gets in front of him and says, "Hey, dude, what the hell are you doing?" And of course, this friend has never met Mark. He's no idea who this guy is. And he just starts saying shit. You know, he starts saying, you know, like, I want this motherfucker gone. I want him gone. You know, like, you know, I can't let him talk to my friends like that. You know, this, that, and the other. And Mark, in like 2 or 3 sentences, he goes, "Hey, man, you can kick that guy's ass, probably get thrown in jail, and you'll feel better about it. But tomorrow, that guy is still gonna be racist. He's still gonna be an asshole. He's still gonna treat people like that, regardless of what you do today, regardless of how you treat that guy today." Immediately diffuses the whole situation in an instant. There was three, there was girls involved too, but there was for sure 2 or 3 guys holding my friend back just so he wouldn't murder this old man in his backyard. Literally, this isn't an exaggeration. He literally wanted to get his hands on this guy. And we 3 couldn't do what Mark did in 2 or 3 sentences. Mind you, Mark knew 2 people at that party. He knew me, and he knew the friend that brought him. That's it. It wasn't a friend group. It wasn't his family. He didn't know anybody at that party, and he diffused that entire situation in an instant. My friend goes, you know what? You're right. Let's go have a drink. Fuck that guy. Let's go have a drink. And Mark goes, hell yeah, dude. You know, like the fucking way that Mark laughs, you know? I came to AYW through Rolo, of course, through that friend group. I came to AYW.
I first met Mark through Joey, who was in the band with him. Joey was our referee at the time. And when I first met Mark, you see this big guy, but just funny personality, heart of gold, nicest dude I've ever met. Just the chillest guy ever.
We're literally just like every grassroots backyard wrestling show, you know, literally people's backyard. The kind of the theme that Rolo had with AYW, of course, all yard wrestling, is to go to different people's houses, you know, I guess like a rotation of like 2, 3, 4 houses. That way, you know, he could build little fan bases at each house, which is actually, you know, that's pretty smart. You know, that's, you know, not a lot of people do a touring show, especially not wrestling, in people's backyards, you know? That doesn't really exist. I mean, it's not like a circus, you know, where you have to take a tent and trapeze artists and stuff. It's literally just kids wrestling in the backyard, you know? That hadn't been done, so you know, Rolo kind of had his grip in that one, you know, and of course, Rolo's trying to invite as many people as he knew, or as many people as he could, you know, friends, family, whoever, and of course, that's how I hear about the show. I'm like, yeah, you know, I'll go, you know, that'd be fun, but of course, I know all the guys, you know, very, very quickly, it was like, Joey's backstage now. Also, Joey's gonna help with the show somehow, you know, either MC or whatever. And that was kind of like my introduction to the world of AYW. So very quickly, it went from MC-ish, kind of welcoming people and inviting people in, and they immediately gave me a referee jersey to start refereeing for this show. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. You know, I don't want to have to hold the cameras. I like spectating and talking shit anyway, you know, so I might as well do it from like up close, you know. And that was really how I entered all yard wrestling. I don't necessarily know how many shows I did with AYW or how many AYW shows there actually were. But I remember 2 or 3, you know, decent sized ones. I was, of course, refereeing, you know, it was kind of my job to partly MC the show, partly referee, partly talk shit, partly, you know, try and make people laugh and keep people interested, you know, because there was a bunch of idiots in their backyard, you know, like you bring your A game when you're entertaining people for free, you know, like you really got to bring it when you do shit like that. And that's what I try to do. I try to make people laugh and you know, things like that. But those were always a good time. Those were always so fun because for the most part, it was just like family and friends, you know, and who doesn't love that? So there's one show in particular which Mark was a part of. He didn't come out as Mark, of course. He came out as King Terror. I think it was literally just like a black bandana and just him in his regular clothes, you know, which was fine. That worked at the time, you know.
Mark came up to me one time and he wanted to wrestle, but he didn't want to be a wrestler for the show. He just wanted to wrestle one match. Which we needed, and I agreed to just because I wanted him in the show. I loved Mark. I thought he was a great guy. I wanted him.
To mess with him, I kept calling him King Terror. I kept calling him Terror King instead of King Terror. At some point that became Burger King. Thought it was clever back then, you know, it's not that funny now, but back then people were losing it.
And he did his match, and it was a good match. But what really stuck with me is at the end of the show, after my match with Ryan, he came out and he just completely wrecked through everybody. And he left the show, walked out as the top guy. I just thought it was the best. What I'm really gonna miss about Mark, his personality, the fact that he always lent a helping hand to anybody, and just cared and loved what he did and what he was doing with his life. You know, you can't buy that happiness. If I could tell Mark anything now, it would just be, you know, we miss you downhill. We wish we had more time with you. I personally wish I had more time with you. I wish I can get back the time I missed with you. And I just hope the best for your family, for your loved ones, all your friends, and that you just rest well and look down at those who you love.
That just kind of shows you like Mark's welcoming demeanor, and just, you know, he's always down to do anything. You know, that was a show put on by friends in their backyard, and he was like, yeah, hell yeah, I want to be part of that, you know? That just plays into who Mark really is. And that's a good friend, a creative friend, a friend that's always down to help his friends. And, you know, the world needs more people like that.